asked when the wedding is, and my son-in-law said we got married last week. All I did was ask, when is the wedding? My son-in-law didn't even blink. He smirked and said, we got married last week. She didn't want you there, said you'd embarrass her. The room went silent. Then I heard the whispers, the pitying stares, and even a few cruel chuckles. My knees trembled as tears burned my eyes, but he just smiled wider, enjoying my pain. This is the story of how my own daughter erased me from her happiest day and let her husband humiliate me in front of everyone. Hello family, welcome back. Before we begin, I have a small but heartfelt request. Please subscribe. Your support is what keeps these stories alive. Every time you click that button, you're helping us share voices that would otherwise be forgotten and stories that deserve to be heard. And in the comments, tell us where you're watching from, because together we are not just telling stories, we are keeping hope alive. The living room buzzed with chatter and clinking glasses. Laughter rose and fell like waves as relatives mingled, trading stories about work, vacations and children. Margaret stood near the table of appetizers, nervously smoothing the wrinkles from her plain blue dress. It wasn't new, but she had ironed it carefully that morning. She wanted to look presentable, respectable, like a mother should. Her eyes followed her daughter Sophia across the room. Sophia glowed in a fitted white dress, her hair pinned perfectly, her smile wide and confident. She moved with a new sort of pride, holding her husband's arm like a prize she had won. Margaret had waited for this moment for years, the day she could finally ask about wedding plans, the day she could dream about walking her daughter down the aisle, even if tradition didn't call for it. At least, she thought, there would be flowers, vows, and a chance to cry happy tears. When Daniel, her son-in-law, came closer with Sophia, Margaret's heart picked up speed. She tried her warmest smile, the one she used when Sophia was still a little girl running home with scraped knees. So, Daniel, Margaret asked, voice light, casual, almost playful. When's the wedding? Have you two set a date yet? For a second, Daniel just stared at her, his lips twitching like he was holding back a laugh. Then he leaned closer, smirk spreading across his face, his voice loud enough for the room to hear. Oh, Margaret, he said slowly, savouring the words. We already got married last week at the courthouse. The sound around Margaret dimmed into a heavy silence. She blinked, not sure if she heard correctly. What? She whispered. Daniel tilted his head, enjoying himself. We got married without you. Sophia didn't want you there. Said you'd embarrass her. A loud gasp broke through the silence. Someone dropped a glass. It shattered against the floor. Whispers spread quickly, snaking through the crowd. Margaret's knees went weak. Her hand trembled against the table, gripping the edge to stay upright. She turned to Sophia, her daughter, her only child. Sophia, you didn't tell me? Sophia looked at her with cold eyes, her smile gone. You always make everything about you, Mom. I didn't want you ruining my day with your crying and your drama. Margaret felt the words hit harder than a slap. Ruining? Sophia, Daniel cut in, his voice dripping with mockery. Don't take it so personally, Margaret. Weddings are for the young. You wouldn't have fit in anyway. Old-fashioned dresses, old-fashioned manners. You'd stick out like a sore thumb. The whispers grew louder now, crueler. Some guests chuckled softly, while others shook their heads with pity. Margaret's chest burned, her vision blurred with tears. She wanted to run, to hide, to scream, but her legs refused to move. Sophia folded her arms, standing closer to Daniel. Mom, you need to accept that I'm not your little girl anymore. I don't need you making decisions for me. I have Daniel now. Daniel grinned, sliding an arm possessively around Sophia's waist. That's right. She's my wife now. My responsibility. You had your chance to guide her. Now it's my turn. He looked Margaret up and down, smirking. Maybe it's better this way. You can finally step aside. Margaret's lips parted, but no words came out. Her throat closed, heavy with grief and humiliation. She glanced around, searching for a friendly face, while someone to defend her. But no one moved. Even her sisters looked away, pretending to sip their drinks. Daniel leaned even closer, his voice low but sharp, meant only for Margaret. You're nothing here. Sophia is mine now, and I'll make sure she never looks back. Margaret froze, the words sinking into her heart like poison. Margaret swallowed hard, forcing her voice to steady. Sophia, how could you? After everything I've done for you? All those years, working double shifts, skipping meals just so you could eat, sewing your dresses by hand so you'd look nice at school, and now you throw me away like this? Sophia's lips tightened. Mom, stop making a scene. Everyone's staring. Daniel chuckled, pulling Sophia even closer. Don't bother explaining to her, baby. She'll never understand. She's stuck in the past, clinging to old sacrifices no one asked her to make. Margaret turned toward him, anger breaking through her tears. You don't know me. You don't know what I've given up for her. Daniel's eyes gleamed. I know enough. I know you're bitter, lonely, and desperate to control her because you have nothing else in your life. Isn't that right? Without Sophia, who are you? Just an aging woman in a cheap dress, begging for scraps of attention. A few cruel laughs echoed in the room. Someone muttered, That's harsh, but nobody stepped in. Margaret's face burned. She wanted to scream at them all, to remind them of the nights she stayed awake nursing Sophia's fevers, of the mornings she left for work before sunrise. But the words wouldn't come. Sophia's voice cut in, cold and sharp. This is exactly why I didn't invite you. You always have to make everything about your sacrifices, your struggles, your pain. I wanted one day that was just about me and Daniel. That's why I left you out. Margaret staggered back as though struck. Her own daughter's words rang louder than the whispers now. Left you out. On purpose. Daniel smiled wide, enjoying the devastation. You see, Margaret? She doesn't need your chains anymore. I've freed her. She has me now, and I'll make sure she never goes back to living under your shadow. Margaret shook her head, barely able to breathe. Sophia, I am your mother. Sophia's eyes softened for a second, just enough to sting before hardening again. You'll always be my mother. But that doesn't mean you get to be part of my life. Daniel leaned close to Sophia, whispering loud enough for Margaret to hear. Don't worry, love. She'll get the message soon. She'll learn to stay in her place. Sophia gave a small nod, almost invisible, but Margaret saw it. That nod crushed whatever was left of her heart. The room shifted back to life, music playing again, glasses clinking, people trying to cover their discomfort. But Margaret stood frozen in the centre, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. She felt like a ghost, present but unseen. Her sister Linda finally stepped forward, placing a hand on Margaret's arm. Maybe you should go, Maggie, she whispered, eyes darting nervously toward Daniel, before it gets worse. Margaret pulled away. Her voice trembled but carried strength. No, I have every right to be here. This is my daughter. Daniel's laugh cut through the room like glass. Your daughter? Not anymore. She's mine. Everything she is, everything she has, it belongs to me now. And there's nothing you can do about it. Margaret's eyes locked on his, and for a fleeting moment she saw the truth behind his smirk. A man who thrived on control, on domination, on breaking people until they had nothing left. But she also saw something else. Over Daniel's shoulder, near the kitchen doorway, he leaned toward a friend, smiling that same twisted smile, and whispered, She'll learn to stay in her place. Sophia's mine now. The words struck Margaret like a dagger. She knew then that this wasn't just cruelty for show. Daniel meant it. He intended to erase her from Sophia's life completely. Margaret's chest ached, but she lifted her chin. If Daniel thought she would quietly fade away, he was wrong. The humiliation tonight had broken her, yes, but it had also lit a small, fierce fire in her heart. For the first time in years, Margaret felt something new, not just pain, but resolve. And Daniel, still smirking in triumph, had no idea what storm he had just awakened. If you haven't subscribed yet, we'd love for you to join our community by hitting the subscribe button. Through our stories, we build hope and give a future to children and women who have been abused all over the world. Motivate us by subscribing and turning on your notification bell so you never miss a story that matters. Also, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from and how did this story speak to you? The days after the party felt endless. Margaret woke up each morning with a heavy chest, her mind replaying Daniel's smirk and Sophia's cruel words. The humiliation had not faded. It grew sharper with every hour of silence. She picked up her phone one morning and dialed Sophia's number. Her hands trembled as the call rang. Finally, Sophia answered, her voice flat. Mom, what do you want? Margaret swallowed. Sophia, please, we need to talk. Just the two of us. I don't understand what happened. I want to fix this. Sophia sighed loudly. There's nothing to fix. I made my choice. You're my daughter, Margaret whispered. I raised you. I gave you everything I had. How can you cut me off like this? On the other end, Margaret heard a low male voice. Daniel. Then Sophia repeated his words like a script. Stop interfering, Mom. This is my life. If you love me, let me live it the way I want. Tears blurred Margaret's eyes. Sophia, I just don't want you to get hurt. Enough, Sophia snapped. You'll never understand. Just stay out of it. The line went dead. Margaret sat frozen, the phone still pressed to her ear. Daniel had poisoned her daughter, twisting her against her own mother. That week, Margaret noticed something even more painful. Her family and friends began pulling away. Her sister Linda, once her closest confidant, stopped returning calls. When Margaret ran into her at the grocery store, Linda gave her a quick smile but avoided conversation. Her neighbour, Mrs. Collins, barely waved anymore. And when Margaret greeted an old friend from church, the woman shifted uncomfortably and muttered, I heard you've been difficult lately. Maybe it's better to give Sophia some space. Margaret's heart sank. She knew where the whispers came from. Late one evening, she overheard two cousins speaking at the local cafe. Daniel said Margaret's always been controlling, one whispered. He said she tried to stop the wedding because she's jealous. That poor man, the other sighed. Imagine marrying into such a toxic family. No wonder Sophia didn't invite her mother. Margaret left the cafe with her head bowed, cheeks burning. Daniel was winning. He was cutting her off not only from Sophia but from everyone else who mattered. One afternoon, while hanging laundry in the backyard, Margaret heard a voice through the fence. It was her neighbour, Mr. Johnson, speaking to his wife. That Daniel fellow, he muttered, lowering his voice. I saw him last week, parked outside the diner on Oak Street. He wasn't with Sophia. He was with that woman Clara, the tall brunette who works at the boutique. And let me tell you, it wasn't no business meeting. They were holding hands like teenagers. Margaret froze, the wet sheet clutched in her hands. Her pulse quickened. Clara, another woman. She waited until the Johnsons went inside before collapsing into the lawn chair. She had suspected Daniel was a liar, but hearing it confirmed shook her to the core. Dear God, she whispered. He's cheating on her already. The next morning, Margaret tried again. She called Sophia, voice shaking but determined. Sophia, listen to me. I need to warn you about Daniel. He's seeing another woman. Her name is Clara. People have seen them together. Please don't ignore this. There was a pause. Then Sophia's voice, sharp as a blade. Mom, stop. Just stop. Sophia, it's the truth. I'm not making this up. I love you. I don't want you to get hurt. Sophia cut her off. You've always hated every man I loved. First Jeremy, then Michael, and now Daniel. You just can't stand to see me happy. You want me alone and miserable like you. Margaret's breath caught. Miserable? Sophia, is that what you think of me? I don't think it. I know it. Sophia spat. You'll never be happy, so you don't want me to be either. That's why you're making up these lies. The line went dead again. Margaret stared at the phone, her hands trembling. Her daughter's trust gone, her reputation destroyed, and Daniel, somewhere out there, smiling as everything fell perfectly into place. But Margaret wasn't finished. Deep inside her heart, a small voice whispered, if he's lying to Sophia, I will find proof, and I will make her see the truth. The days dragged on, each one heavier than the last. Margaret could barely sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Daniel's smirk, heard Sophia's harsh voice telling her she wanted her miserable like you. Still, Margaret's heart wouldn't let her give up. She walked to Sophia's apartment one evening, clutching a small gift bag with homemade cookies. She prayed that maybe, just maybe, a simple gesture of love could soften her daughter's heart. When she rang the bell, it was Daniel who opened the door. His face lit up, not with warmth, but with cruel amusement. Well, look who it is, he drawled. The unwanted mother-in-law. Didn't you get the message last time? I came to see my daughter, Margaret said, steadying her voice. Please, Daniel, let me talk to her. Daniel leaned against the doorframe, blocking her path. Sophia's busy. With me, and she doesn't need you barging into her life anymore. You're like a disease, Margaret, infecting everyone with your bitterness. Margaret's jaw tightened. You can't keep me from her forever. He laughed, leaning closer so she could smell the alcohol on his breath. Watch me. You've already lost her. The more you fight, the worse it'll get. Keep pushing, and she'll cut you off for good. Margaret's eyes stung, but she refused to cry. You're a cruel man, Daniel. One day Sophia will see the truth. Daniel's smirk widened. By then, it'll be too late. She'll be mine completely. He slammed the door in her face, leaving her standing in the hallway with the cookies still in her trembling hands. The next week brought more whispers, more sideways glances. At church, Margaret overheard two women murmuring in the pew behind her. They say Margaret tried to stop Sophia's wedding out of jealousy. Imagine that, a mother jealous of her own daughter's happiness. Margaret bowed her head lower, her cheeks burning. The lies were spreading like wildfire, and Daniel was fanning the flames. After the service, her sister Linda approached her, face tight with discomfort. "Maggie," Linda said softly, "I think you should back off from Sophia. People are talking. They say you've become unstable." Margaret's heart clenched. "Linda, you know me. You know I would never hurt my own daughter." Linda sighed. "I want to believe that. But Daniel says you've been trying to ruin their marriage. He says you're spreading rumours about him being unfaithful." Margaret grabbed her sister's hand desperately. "They're not rumours, Linda. I heard it myself. He's been seen with a woman named Clara. Please believe me." Linda pulled her hand away, her eyes filled with pity. "Maggie, you need help. Let them live their life." And with that she walked away. Margaret sat alone that night, staring at the dark ceiling. Everyone had turned against her, family, friends, even the church. Daniel had poisoned every well, but her neighbour's words still echoed in her ears. Daniel with Clara at the diner. The next morning, Margaret made a decision. If no one believed her words, she would gather proof that could not be denied. 2 days later, Margaret sat in her old sedan, parked across from the boutique where Clara worked. Her hands gripped the steering wheel, her stomach in knots. She hated herself for doing this, for sinking so low, but she told herself it wasn't spying. It was survival. Sure enough, in the late afternoon, Daniel's car pulled up. He stepped out, looking sharp in a dark jacket. Clara emerged minutes later, her smile bright as she slid her arm into his. They walked together down the street, laughing like lovers, oblivious to the world. Margaret's throat tightened, but she didn't look away. She watched Daniel lean close, whispering something into Clara's ear that made her giggle, and then her stomach dropped. He kissed her, right there in broad daylight. Margaret's hands shook, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Now I know," she whispered to herself, "and I will make Sophia see it too." That night, she sat at her kitchen table staring at her phone. She wanted to call Sophia immediately, to shout the truth, but she knew how it would go. Daniel would twist it, Sophia would lash out, and she'd be the villain again. No, this time had to be different. This time she would have proof. Pictures, witnesses, whatever it took. Margaret wiped her tears and straightened her shoulders. Daniel thought he had broken her, that he had erased her place in Sophia's life. But he didn't know Margaret. He didn't know the strength of a mother's love, or the fire of a mother betrayed. Margaret sat at her kitchen table, staring at the neat stack of unpaid bills. The electricity notice sat on top, the red letters screaming, "Final warning." She rubbed her temples. For years she had worked 2 jobs to make sure Sophia never went without, and now, with her daughter gone and her reputation shattered, she had no one to lean on. She dialed Sophia again, desperation in her chest. After several rings, the call connected. "Mom," Sophia's voice came, irritated. "Why do you keep calling me?" Margaret's voice cracked. "Sophia, please. I don't want money. I just want to see you. I miss you." Daniel's voice cut in, sharp and mocking. "She doesn't have time for your drama, Margaret. Go bother someone else." "Daniel," Margaret began, but Sophia interrupted. "Stop it, Mom. Just stop. You don't get it. You ruin everything. I'm finally happy and you can't stand it. You're trying to drag me back into your misery." Margaret's throat closed. "That's not true, Sophia. You're my daughter. I just want you safe. Please, listen to me." The line went dead. Margaret pressed the phone to her chest and sobbed, the sound echoing through the empty house. 2 days later, Margaret forced herself to attend a family dinner hosted by her cousin. She hoped maybe someone would stand by her, someone would remind her she wasn't completely alone. When she arrived, the chatter grew hushed. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats. She tried to ignore it and sat down, offering a polite smile. Daniel and Sophia entered minutes later, holding hands. Sophia looked radiant, her eyes glowing with the kind of pride Margaret used to dream of seeing on her wedding day. Daniel caught Margaret's eye and smirked. Then, as though it were a casual remark, he said loudly, "You know, Sophia and I were just laughing about how her mother tried to accuse me of cheating. Isn't that pathetic? She'll say anything to tear us apart." Laughter rippled through the room. Someone muttered, "Always jealous, that Margaret." Margaret's face burned. "That's not true," she said, her voice trembling. "I only spoke up because I care about my daughter." Daniel cut her off smoothly. "You mean because you're bitter? Bitter that she has a man who loves her? Bitter that you're alone? Tell me, Margaret, when was the last time anyone cared enough to stay with you?" Gasps filled the room. Margaret's chest felt like it might collapse. She turned to Sophia, pleading, "Sophia, say something. Tell them it isn't true." Sophia's expression was stone. She didn't defend her mother. Instead, she took Daniel's hand tighter. "He's right, Mom. You're obsessed. You need help." A hush fell over the table. Margaret felt the world spin around her. She pushed back her chair and fled, tears streaming down her face as the sound of Daniel's laughter followed her out the door. That night, Margaret sold her late husband's watch, a treasured keepsake she had clung to for years. She needed the money to keep the lights on, but letting go of that watch felt like burying him all over again. She stood in the pawn shop staring at the glass counter, barely able to hold the ticket in her hand. When she got home, the house felt colder than ever. She collapsed into bed and whispered, "God, I can't take much more." But the next morning, as she walked into town to clear her mind, fate intervened. A family friend, Mrs. Harris, stopped her in the street. "Margaret," she said gently, glancing around as if afraid to be overheard, "I don't know what to believe anymore, but I thought you should know. I saw Daniel myself with Clara at the hotel near the highway. They weren't just talking. It was clear what they were doing." Margaret's breath caught. "Are you sure?" Mrs. Harris nodded. "I wish I wasn't. I thought Sophia should know, but I didn't dare say a word. He's dangerous, Margaret. Be careful." Margaret's tears came hot and fast. But this time they weren't only tears of pain, they carried a spark of something else. She whispered, clutching Mrs. Harris's hand. "You don't know what this means to me." Mrs. Harris hesitated, then gave her a small smile. "Be smart, Margaret. Don't let him destroy you. Fight back." Margaret wiped her face, her voice steady for the first time in weeks. "Oh, I will. He thinks he's won, but he hasn't seen the last of me." Margaret spent the next few days in a fog. She went through the motions, cooking, cleaning, working odd shifts at the diner, but her heart wasn't in it. Her body moved, but her spirit felt hollow. Everywhere she went, Daniel's lies followed her. At the market, two women whispered as she passed, their eyes full of pity. At church, people avoided sitting near her pew. Even her oldest friends had gone silent. Daniel had painted her as a jealous, bitter woman, and the world had believed him. One evening, Margaret sat at her table with a single candle burning. The house was dim, the electricity shut off again despite pawning her husband's watch. She sipped cold tea and stared at the shadows dancing on the wall. Her phone buzzed. A message. For a moment her heart leapt. Maybe Sophia had come to her senses. But it wasn't Sophia, it was Daniel. The text read, "Pathetic. Everyone laughs at you now. Give up, Margaret. You'll never win." Margaret's hands shook as she read the words. A hot tear slid down her cheek, but she quickly wiped it away. She wouldn't let him see her broken, even through a phone screen. She set the phone down, took a deep breath, and whispered, "No, not anymore." But the next blow came faster than she expected. She went to the bank to withdraw money for groceries, only to learn that her account was nearly empty. Shocked, she demanded an explanation. The teller frowned, pulling up her records. Several withdrawals were made this month, large ones. Margaret's head spun. She hadn't touched the account in weeks. She pressed her hand to her mouth. Daniel. Somehow, he had gotten to her finances, too. As she left the bank, her legs trembled. She leaned against the brick wall outside, gasping for breath. It felt like her life was collapsing one brick at a time, and Daniel was the one pushing the wall down. That night she collapsed on the couch, burying her face in her hands. She thought of her late husband, how proud he had been of Sophia, how hard he had worked to build a safe life for them. If he could see this now, what would he say? "I've failed her," Margaret whispered into the silence. "I've failed everyone." The weight of despair pressed so heavy on her chest that for a moment she thought about giving up completely, staying quiet, fading away, letting Daniel have his victory. But then she remembered Mrs. Harris's voice. Be smart. Don't let him destroy you. Fight back. The words echoed in her mind like a bell. Slowly, Margaret sat up. Her tears dried on her cheeks, but her eyes sharpened. Daniel had taken almost everything from her, her reputation, her friends, even her daughter's love. But he hadn't taken her will. Not yet. The very next day, Margaret returned to the boutique where Clara worked. She parked in the same spot, waiting, her old sedan blending into the line of cars. Hours passed, but Margaret didn't move. Her patience was fueled by anger, and her anger by love for her daughter. Sure enough, Daniel appeared again. Clara rushed out to greet him, throwing her arms around his neck. This time, Margaret was ready. She raised a shaky hand and snapped photos with her phone, one then another, until her storage nearly filled. Her heart pounded, but she didn't stop. She caught them kissing, holding hands, laughing together like newlyweds themselves. When she lowered the phone, her chest felt lighter than it had in weeks. For the first time, Margaret had something Daniel couldn't twist with his lies. She had the truth, and the truth had power. That night, she returned home and laid the phone on the table. She scrolled through the pictures, her tears blurring the screen. They weren't just proof of Daniel's betrayal. They were proof she wasn't crazy. Proof that she had been right all along. Margaret took a deep breath, clutching the phone tightly. You think you've broken me, Daniel, she whispered into the quiet house. But you've only made me stronger. You've taken my friends, my family, my peace. But you won't take my daughter. Not forever. Her voice grew firmer. I'll make her see you for what you are. I'll make everyone see. The candle burned low, casting her shadow, tall and unshaken, against the wall. For the first time in weeks, Margaret felt alive again. Not just a broken mother, but a woman ready to fight. And somewhere in town, Daniel slept peacefully, unaware that the storm he thought he had crushed was about to rise stronger than ever. The town had been buzzing for days. Everyone whispered about the invitation that had gone out. Sophia and Daniel were hosting a grand party at the new banquet hall. The announcement read, "A celebration of love, of unity, and of our beautiful future together." Margaret heard about it second-hand. Nobody dared give her an invitation. She was the family outcast now, the mother no one spoke of without lowering their voices. But when she saw the news plastered across social media, her heart hardened. They want to flaunt their marriage? Then let them. Tonight, I will be there too. The banquet hall glittered with golden chandeliers and polished marble floors. Guests arrived in their best suits and gowns, chatter filling the air. At the centre of it all stood Sophia, radiant in a pale silk dress, her hand resting proudly in Daniel's. "Thank you for coming," Daniel said to a circle of relatives, his smile smooth as silk. "We're grateful to have such support. It means everything, Sophia." He kissed her hand, and Sophia blushed. The crowd clapped, their admiration plain. No one noticed the older woman standing quietly near the doorway, dressed in her modest navy dress. Margaret's heart thudded painfully in her chest as she took in the scene. Her palms were sweaty, her breath shallow, but she stood tall. When a hush spread across the room and Daniel stepped onto the small stage to make his speech, Margaret moved forward. "Ladies and gentlemen," Daniel began, his voice booming with confidence, "tonight we celebrate love, the kind of love that withstands challenges and outlasts lies." His eyes flicked toward Margaret, mocking. "The kind of love that survives even when others try to destroy it." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Sophia beamed proudly. That was Margaret's cue. She stepped into the light. Gasps erupted across the hall. "She came," someone whispered. Daniel's smirk grew wider. "Margaret, how bold of you to show your face." Sophia stiffened, her lips tightening. "Mom, why are you here? You weren't invited." Margaret's voice carried steady and calm. "I came to thank you, Daniel, for taking such good care of my daughter." The room fell silent. Daniel raised an eyebrow, feigning surprise. Well, look at that. Finally some respect." But Margaret wasn't finished. Slowly she reached into her handbag and pulled out a neat folder. "Yes, thank you, for showing me your true self so clearly, for making it so easy to gather the proof." Murmurs spread through the guests. Daniel's confident smile faltered. "Proof? What nonsense are you spouting now?" Margaret opened the folder and pulled out photographs. She lifted one high for the crowd to see. It showed Daniel and Clara outside the boutique, his lips pressed to hers. Gasps echoed across the hall. That's not, Daniel stammered, his charm slipping. But Margaret pulled out another photo, then another. Daniel's hand on Clara's waist, Daniel whispering into her ear, Daniel holding her hand as they walked together. The room exploded in noise. Guests surged forward, whispering, pointing, snapping pictures with their phones. Sophia's face drained of colour. Daniel, what is this? Daniel's mask cracked completely. He reached for Sophia's hand, desperation in his eyes. Darling, it's nothing. Lies. She's trying to ruin us. But Margaret wasn't finished. She pulled out a final set of papers, bank transfer records, signed receipts, a hotel booking under Daniel's name. These aren't lies. These are facts. And tonight everyone will see them. The crowd erupted again, some shouting in disbelief, others glaring at Daniel with disgust. Sophia staggered back, her hand covering her mouth. Daniel! Tell me it isn't true, she whispered, tears filling her eyes. Daniel's voice broke as he tried to recover. Sophia, listen to me. She's desperate to ruin me. But before he could reach her, a voice rose from the back of the hall. He's lying. All eyes turned. Clara stepped forward, her hands trembling as she cradled her swollen belly. Her voice cracked, but it rang clear. I'm pregnant with Daniel's child. The room exploded with noise, gasps, screams, whispers. Guests turned on each other, covering their mouths in shock. Sophia stumbled back as though the ground had disappeared beneath her. No, this can't be. She looked at Daniel, her voice breaking. Tell me it isn't true! Tell me! Daniel's mask cracked. He reached for Sophia, his charm gone, desperation in his voice. Sophia, listen to me. She means nothing. It's you I love, you. But Margaret cut him off, her voice like steel. Enough. The truth is here for everyone to see. You used my daughter, you humiliated me, you tried to erase me, but tonight it ends. Sophia's eyes darted between the photos, the bank transfers, Clara's swollen belly, and Daniel's frantic face. The reality hit her like a blow, her knees buckled, and she collapsed into a chair, sobbing. You lied to me, she whispered. You made me turn against my own mother. For this? Daniel dropped his charm completely, his face twisted with anger. Don't be a fool, Sophia. You need me. Without me, you're nothing. She'll just drag you down again. But Sophia covered her ears, shaking her head violently. No more. The crowd surged with judgment now, but this time their whispers weren't aimed at Margaret. They glared at Daniel, disgust in their eyes. How could he? Someone muttered. To cheat on her so soon. And with a child on the way. Daniel turned, realizing the tide had shifted. His smirk was gone, replaced with rage. This isn't over, Margaret. You'll regret this. But Margaret only straightened her back, her voice calm and sharp. No, Daniel, you'll regret underestimating me. She turned to Sophia. For a brief moment, silence hung between them, mother and daughter bound by shared ruin. Sophia reached out a trembling hand, tears streaming down her face. Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have listened. Margaret stepped back. Her eyes were steady, her tone firm. You chose him, Mummy Sophia. You believed his lies, and now you'll live with that choice. Sophia broke into sobs, her body shaking as the weight of her betrayal crushed her. Margaret didn't offer comfort. Not tonight. Tonight wasn't about reconciliation. Tonight was about truth. She turned, walking toward the doors as the room erupted into chaos behind her. Guests shouted, Clara wept, Sophia collapsed in tears, and Daniel shouted curses into the night. But Margaret didn't look back. Her heels clicked against the marble floor, each step stronger than the last. When she reached the cool night air outside, she lifted her chin high. For the first time in years, she felt no shame, no humiliation, only peace. The whispers would spread tomorrow, she knew, but they wouldn't be about her anymore. They would be about Daniel, the cheater, about Sophia, the daughter who betrayed her mother for the wrong man, about Clara, carrying the child of a liar. And Margaret? She would walk forward with dignity. Because betrayal wounds deepest when it comes from family, but truth and dignity can outlast every lie. As she disappeared into the night, the banquet hall behind her crumbling with chaos, Margaret whispered to herself, It's over. At last it's over. And for once, the words felt true.